Good morning and welcome to all you home language types out there. Thank you for joining us for this little presentation, and the studio crew all send regards. We are looking at, as you can see, exam tips for Paper 1. And there you will see also on the screen, my thanks go to the entire English home language staff of Brebner, who very kindly informed me of all the little tips that you're going to receive today, because they form the majority of the Paper 1 markers. So a very fruitful conversation it was that we had. Now, let's get straight into it. Here, as you can see, are some exam tips directly from those who work with the marking. And this is the first comment that they made. And there you can see it says, don't answer chronologically. In other words, you don't answer the questions in the order in which they come. Instead, you do this. Now remember that number, 25341. Call any time for all the tips you want. Just ring 25341. English home language. Haha. No, this is what it's all about. You start with the summary, which is, of course, question 2. Let me just see if I can... Yeah, there we are. There you'll see question 2, question 2. Now, the reason for that is that the summary, as a general rule, gives by far the highest average mark. There is a problem that many people encounter every year. And I've been asked by the markers to tell you about this. Most of the candidates assume that they have to answer the questions in the given order. This is not the case. Remember that every one of your questions is going to be marked by a different marker. Markers don't mark a variety of questions, they mark only one. So, it doesn't matter which question it is with which you begin, it's still going to be marked by the same person, who still has to scan through your script to find where the question is. So, honestly, I advise you to mark in this order. To answer in this order. Notice I'm getting all tongue-twisted, possibly as a result of all the coffee I had this morning. And because the summary gives the highest marks, that's where to begin. And then the second. Now you see here, the second number in sequence, number 5. Let's go to that. And we see here that number 5 is the language question. Okay, so already there, we're home dry. You get those out of the way first, because those are your top scorers. Okay, third, advertisement. Question 3. Normally the results on an advertisement are fairly good, right? So that's where you go. Fourth, the cartoon, which is of course question 4. Now there already it gets quite tricky, but even so, as a general guide, it's also one of the highest scorers. Now you notice also that these 4 questions are all out of a total of 10 marks each. So you get them out of the way fairly quickly. Well, the summary not so very quickly, because you should take a bit more time on the summary than you do, for example, on the advertisement or the cartoon sections. But having said that, by the time you've got these out of the way, you'll still have well over an hour left in which to handle the most complex of all the questions, which is, of course, the comprehension. On many occasions, I've been told by the Paper 1 markers about the disastrous results that they've had in certain papers because of the people taking too long on the comprehension. Now, don't worry, I'm not revealing exam secrets here or anything like that. This is just the practical way it is. You'll find it in the markers report, which is not a confidential document. So the whole thing is, don't start with a comprehension. You can start with anyone you want to, as long as you feel comfortable with it. But our advice is, avoid starting with the comprehension. Try to leave that for last. How many times, we don't know, that the comprehension has taken so long to answer that the higher scoring questions have basically failed because of a lack of time in which to finish them. Please take note of that. This is critical information. And probably this item of information here on the screen in front of you is going to have a very real effect on your marks if you follow this to the letter. Right. Now, because I've advised you to start with the summary is the first question at which we are going to look. Let's go straight there. Now, this is titled Summarizing in Examinations. The summary that you are expected to produce in an exam is not really much like a summary that you would produce in real life. Exam summaries are very specific. They're according to a specific formula, a specific format. You are looking for 7 key points, and you have to condense those 7 key points into less or fewer than 90 words. I almost caught myself out there. A number of words is quantifiable. You can count them. Therefore, it is fewer, not less than. If you're talking about, and here you'll see, the university has kindly provided me with this bottle of water. I cannot use the term fewer water. That is silly. I can only say less water. In the same way, it is silly to say less words when it is supposed to be fewer words. And don't get me started on supermarket queues in the basket queue, or supermarket checkouts, I should say, where it says 10 items or less. They still haven't learned that it's 10 items or fewer, but I think by now already there's been millions of those signs printed, so they don't want to change them. Anyway, here you have what it's all about. It's all about eradicating unnecessary content. Get rid of everything that you don't need in order to squeeze your answer well within the word limit. Now, let's take a look at a few summarizing tips. And I'm going to be a bit more long-winded about the summarizing than about anything else, because this is obviously your first entrance to good marks. So let's get going. Okay, the first one. We beg of you, read the instructions. The instructions do not simply say summarize in under 90 words. That is not what they say. And we are going to look at this in some detail. We're going to be using as an example the prep exam which you recently wrote. And we'll go through it in quite a bit of detail just to explain to you exactly what we mean here. And you notice I'm using the first person plural. I'm including here the advice of the markers to whom I spoke. And it says here, read the instructions in order to determine what information goes into your summary. And there I've given you 2 examples, advice or instructions. But it could be lots of other things. It could be tips. It could be disadvantages of doing something. It could be advantages of doing something. The list goes on quite a long way. But when we look at the our example today, you'll see what I mean. Okay, now I've put here determine the required format. Now, point form or paragraph. I've also put a note there that you, as an English home language student, are expected to produce the final copy in paragraph format. And I want you to take note of that. If you do not produce it in paragraph format, you are jeopardizing your chance of getting full marks. It will still be marked, okay, but you're going to be penalized probably because you have not obeyed the instructions. Okay, word limit 90. We've discussed that already, so we can move on from that. Now, here goes. Now we get to the nuts and bolts, the actual things to do. The first thing you do, once you have read your instructions, is to read through the text. And I've put here at least twice. It makes a difference. You get a better idea of what's going on once you have gone through the text twice. This text is not a long one. It's only 350 words, more or less. You have the time to go through it twice. It's not going to kill you. And the second time is when you actually do the working part of it. The first time is just to give yourself an idea of what's going on in it. And the second time is to select the items for which you are searching. And we're going to do a practice run on this as well. So look forward to that one. It's actually quite good fun. Okay, then once you've done your second reading, you can actually mark on the text the key points. Remember these exam papers which are handed out to you, the question paper. You'll probably hand it back at the end of the exam. Most of the schools love getting hold of those things because they're lovely example papers for next year. But the whole thing is, while it's in your possession, you can do with it what you like. You can write on it. And this is one of the things that I suggest you do, with pencil preferably, so it can be rubbed out. But the whole thing there is mark on it your key points. And usually your key points are going to be formed by the topic sentence, which is, of course, the main sentence of every paragraph, because that's normally a statement of fact. And then, of course, your main clauses within sentences. So, but that's a guideline rather than a rule. Okay, now going on to write a draft. Some teachers tell me that this is a bad idea because it takes too much time. I do not agree. I think it's a good idea because it doesn't take much time. Yes, it will take some, but it shouldn't take a lot. I mean, you're just simply squeezing together a few words before you write out the same thing as a paragraph, and copying it out in paragraph format is not time consuming. Well, it's not murderously time consuming. And please note also that your draft summary, I suggest strongly that you don't do it in a paragraph format because that's too difficult to edit, etc. Do it in point form, right? And obviously for clarity. It's much clearer to see in point form. When you do your paragraph format, that's another story. The marker is experienced. The marker goes through it and identifies whether you have included the correct points or not. But when it comes to the drafting, point form. Okay, let's move on. Now, this next sequence of words took many hours of discussion, actually many minutes of discussion at Brebner. Take a look at this. The following items must not be included in a summary. And let's start with adverbs. Adverbs are words which qualify verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. They have no place in a summary because they are adding certain qualities to basic words. Chuck them out. Adjectives are words that describe nouns. They have no place in the summary because the nouns do not need to be described. Chuck them out. Parenthesis, also known as brackets, and please take note of that. This is one of the confusing things about English is we've got multiple words for the same things. Many multiple words for the same things. I mean, parenthesis and brackets are synonyms. They're the same thing, just a different word. you'll come across later, we talk about things like tautology and redundancy. Same thing. Synonyms, just different words for the same thing. And that's one of the reasons why English is quite tricky to learn if you're not a home language speaker. Okay, but essentially any information chucked into brackets or parentheses, whatever you want to call them, is no. You don't want it because it's other information which is not part of the bare bone structure. Statistics. Statistics are always used to prove a point. They are never a point by themselves. Okay. Examples. When you are flying to the moon, for example, in an Apollo spacecraft, you should not open the hatch. Okay, now what's the important part there? I believe very much is the fact that the hatch should not be opened, regardless of the type of spacecraft in which you are then proceeding through space. If you follow my example. Okay, figurative language. Figurative language is something that is put into creative pieces such as poetry or novels or drama in order to enrich them. You don't need figurative language in a summary. It's something that you should dump, get rid of it. Okay, we all know figurative language. What's it? Simile, metaphor, personification, litote, synecdoche, metonymy, etc., etc., etc. Euphemism. You can go on for a long time. Dump the figurative language. Explanations. Now, an explanation is not part of a summary. It is not a statement of fact. It is not a point for which you are looking. It is not advice. It is explaining the advice, why you're giving that advice, why you're giving that tip, why you're making that recommendation. Okay, so explanations, check them out. And of course, quotes. Now, I've put this one last in the sequence, and I'm just modifying it slightly, moderating it slightly. I'm saying quotes as a general rule, because 90% of quotes are not relevant, but just occasionally you'll get one which is. So this one, use your own discretion, obviously. I can't give you a final pedantic rule on that one. You must use your own discretion in this regard to quite an extent. Let's move on. Okay, please note we have come up to point number 7 in the whole process. Now we come to point number 8, which is to write down your final neat copy in paragraph form. But that's not the end of the story. There's a few other little comments that we have to make. You must still do a final word count. Now, let me be very clear on this. If you don't do a final word count, you will not be penalized. But you will be penalizing yourself, because the final word count is there to ensure that you stay within the 90 words. Please remember that the markers are going to check the number of the words anyway, regardless of what you have written as your word count. It is of little consequence. It's going to be checked. The whole thing here is you must ensure for yourself that you have not gone past 90 words. It's as easy as that. Now, here also, as far as possible, now please note the qualification here. As far as possible, avoid copying directly from the text. Okay. Now, if you notice in the exam, when we look at the example now, you're going to see they talk about summarizing in your own words. That's what it's all about. You're not supposed to just use the words that are on the page in front of you. However, the markers are very lenient. If there's even the slightest difference between your sentence and that which is in the original text, you are not deemed to have copied. Let me repeat that in other words. If you cannot change it entirely into your own words, you may copy some of the sentence, but make sure that it's not the whole sentence. Make changes here and there. How you change it is up to you. Just make sure that it's not entirely the same, and it will not be considered to be a copied sentence. Okay, so I've put there altered, even if only slightly. There must be at least one difference between your sentence as you've written it down and the original one in the text. Okay, having said that, now here comes another funny one. Don't answer according to your own knowledge. I have frequently seen this in summaries where, because a person has pre-existing knowledge concerning the content of the summary and is able to add to it, they do add to it. And it's a big mistake, because you are supposed to be summarizing what is in the text. You are not supposed to be changing it or correcting it. So you've got to stick to what's in the text. I mean, a classic example, let's say we're talking about a text about computers. And I know very well that 99.9% of you out there know more about computers than I do. And it's a safe text to use because nobody's going to say, hey, but I know nothing about computers, this doesn't relate to my life, anything like that. That's nonsense. Everybody's familiar with computers nowadays. And I mean, even if you're only familiar with the phone is still, your cell phone is still a type of computer. And so, the summarize the best ways to utilize your computer at home, etc., etc. And you may know some tricks to successfully utilize your computer at home. But if those tricks are not in the text, don't be tempted to use them. As soon as you put it into your summary, it's wrong. End of story. That's it. Then, so, remember that? None of your own knowledge, what's in the text only. And then this one is from me. I hate it when you get a candidate who assumes that I'm stupid, copies out the entire text word for word and puts in brackets underneath 90 words. Really? Have I got idiots written across my forehead? No, I've got you-offs. And you-offs people aren't stupid. So don't try that trick. If you have overshot the word limit, we're going to count the words anyway. So it doesn't even help to try to trick us. You're merely wasting your own time and ours. Now, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll do a sample summary. This was the first in our series on English home language, Paper 1 exam tips. And just remember that this is the first part of the summarizing section. I'll see you again in a minute or two. Welcome back to the English home language exam tips for Paper 1, and this is the second part in the series. We are now going to look at an example of summarizing in your own words, taken directly from the Free State Paper 1 prep exam. Let's take a look at this. Now, here are those instructions about which I was talking earlier. And in the original paper, I've copied and pasted this across from the original paper. In this case, it's changed the font and the format slightly. So whereas originally it was in bold, here I've simply underlined it for you. Okay. So text C says, text C discusses the option of working abroad with a remote visa, which I still don't entirely understand. Why do they call it a remote visa? I mean, why just a visa without a work, why not just a visa and you don't include a work permit? But anyway, that's what it's called. Read the passage and summarize the benefits of a remote visa. The benefits of a remote visa. The benefits of a remote visa. Now, a certain famous politician of many years back who did his best to perfect genocide in the 20th century said, anything that I repeat 3 times becomes a fact. So I repeated that 3 times for you, not because I am advocating genocide, but because I'm trying to drill it into you. That's what you must do when you read this. Always bear in mind what you have to produce in your summary. And remember, we said in the previous section, it's not merely a question of summarize the text. It gives you now a specific aspect of the text to summarize. And what it is, now this one, it is the benefits, okay, the advantages of why you should like a remote visa. Okay, so that is the items for which we will be searching when we do a demonstration, reading through the summary now. All right, let's move on slightly. Now here's the other bits of the instruction. It says you must write a fluent paragraph. We have already covered that. This is English home language. In home language, any home language, we want a paragraph. We don't want the final copy in point form. That you use for your draft of your summary. The final copy is a fluent paragraph. And please note it says fluent. Okay, it must actually be a well-written paragraph that can be read as a paragraph. Right. There we are. There's the 7 points and 90 words, no more. Right, 91 words is too many words. You don't go past 90. End of story. Okay, now why they always put this in as an instruction, I have no idea. But it says there that you don't need to give a title to the summary. Presumably this is because the markers know already what the title is. So don't put a title on it. And then, as we said earlier, word count. All right. Now, just before we go on, we are going to refresh our memories. Read the passage and summarize the benefits of a remote visa. The benefits, okay, the good things about a remote visa. Got that? Good. Now we can go on. And we're going to take a look at how to do the summary. Whoops. There. Now, because all you guys have already read through this, I'm not going to read through it twice, only once. But I'm going to read through it in such a way that we find the benefits of a remote visa. Okay. Let's take a look at this. I'm going to start to read from the top. A remote visa is a type of immigration permit that allows foreign nationals to move to and live in a country while they are employed and earn an income from a source outside of that country. Does this in any way tell you what a benefit of a remote visa is? No. It is defining what a remote visa is. It doesn't yet give you the benefits. Individuals of any age can embark on a journey across borders, and remote work ensures continued employment, a solid source of income, and none of the uncertainty that expats often face in a foreign job market. Okay, now does that give you benefits of a remote visa? Yes. Yes, most definitely. Okay, you can cross borders. You've got reliable employment. You can cross borders without losing reliable continued employment. You will have a solid source of income and no uncertainty. There's 2 different benefits in that sentence already, as far as I can see. Okay, so again, you always, as you read, is this an advantage? A benefit of a remote visa? Right. Let's go on to our next paragraph. Basically, you could keep your stable job in South Africa and guaranteed salary while working and indulging in the luxuries of a completely different continent. Is that a benefit? Yes. Stable employment and experiencing luxury in a different continent. I think that's a great idea. Okay. Actually, I don't think it's a great idea. I love living and working in Africa. I've long since investigated other countries and working conditions and stuff. That's not for me. I'm an African. I like the veld. I like the open air. I like the big skies. I don't like the congestion of places like the UK and Europe and stuff where there's no open spaces. Oh, not for me, not for me. I'll stick to South Africa. But anyway, you're young, I'm old, I'm set in my ways. You can go for it. Let's move on. Right. Remote work benefits not only employees and businesses, but economies at large. Is that a benefit to a remote visa? Yes, it even says so there. It's a benefit. Okay? So, yes, that is a benefit to a remote visa. As a South African expat abroad, you will benefit both. The word benefit has come up again. Isn't this is a lovely clue? Right. As a South African expat abroad, you will benefit both the South African and your host country's economy, as well as its housing market and tourism sector, while not putting a strain on local employment opportunities. Boy, that's a benefit. Lots and lots and lots of benefits here. Meanwhile, you could be spending your free time hiking up volcanoes and diving into the lava. Hiking up volcanoes in Costa Rica. My mistake, it was a typographical error. Or skiing in the Pyrenees, sipping margaritas in Mexico. That's nice. Or experiencing an authentic Oktoberfest in Germany. Wow, more benefits. Okay. And you're doing all this, remember, while you still got a stable income and you're moving around the whole time. Yes, definitely those are benefits. Okay, here we go. Thanks to the internet, work and travel now often go hand in hand. Is that a benefit, though, of a remote visa? No, it's not. That is simply a statement of fact or leading up to something which will be a benefit to a remote visa. But that's not what I would include in my summary. A diversity of landscapes is begging to be explored, from the tropical idyls of the Caribbean and jungles of South America to the stunning beaches of the Iberian Peninsula. That's Spain and Portugal, by the way. Nice places. And futuristic cityscapes in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, all of which are that much more accessible nowadays with the possibility of remote jobs. Whew, nice long sentence. Benefits there? Tons of them. Lots and lots and lots of benefits. Basically, it means you can go and experience life overseas thanks to your remote visa, and you're still going to have that income. Right? And here we come to our final paragraph. As a matter of fact, many South African remote workers who aren't necessarily keen on permanent immigration are jumping at the chance of temporary stays in new and exciting locales on a remote visa. Is that an advantage? Yes, that is definitely a benefit to a remote visa. Because even if you don't want to immigrate, you can still travel around and experience those places. And the possibilities are endless. Is that another benefit to a remote visa? Well, technically, yes. Lots and lots and lots of opportunities. If Cape Town's Atlantic waters are too cold, perhaps a tropical paradise in the Caribbean is more your bag. Is that a benefit of a remote visa? Yes, but watch out. It is merely an example of a benefit that we have already had. Here is an example which must be omitted. You don't need an example to reinforce the point. The point has been made already. If Joburg city life just does not cut it, you might be in awe of Prague's eclectic nightlife. Is that a benefit of a remote visa? Yes. However, again, it's an example of a point which we have already covered, and the possibilities are endless. So watch out. You must be careful not to include those examples, because that's essentially the same point repeated over. And for those of you who are wondering, what does eclectic mean? It means diverse. Okay? It just talks about diverse, varied, lots of different types of nightlife. So that's the actual meaning. And there we are. We have now come to the end of our second section on tips for English home language, paper 1. And this was the last bit about summarizing. I'll see you again in a minute or two as we carry on. Goodbye for now. Welcome back. This is the third in our series on exam tips for English home language paper 1. And as you have doubtless worked out by the fact that it's written in very large bold print on the screen, we are going on to language. The reason for language is because that this is the second section which is recommended to be done when answering your paper 1. And we are following the advice of those highly talented markers today. Now, the first thing that they've asked me to include in this presentation is aspects to consider. Okay? Always, well, 90% of the time, you're going to get a question based on concord. Concord is, of course, agreement between the form of the verb and the subject of the sentence. It can be very tricky indeed sometimes. And then terminology. Now, I haven't specifically addressed much terminology here, but for those of you who have been watching, I have been addressing confusing terminology all the way through the first part of the presentation. And then tenses, specifically tenses in reported speech. But that's not the only place where tense confusion comes in. So we are going to look at both some English language basics and some tenses before the end of this particular session. Then let's carry on and look at our language question. Again, I've taken this from the prep exam recently written. So you're familiar with the text already, but I am going to read through it with you. And the title to this text, which is a most amusing text, by the way, I've never come across anything quite so unusual used in an English paper 1. This is weird, but it's so good. Right, here we've got Craig Foster, suffering from a loss of purpose, begins a daily diving regimen every day in the freezing kelp forests at the tip of Africa in order to gradually re-energize himself. What he discovers below the water's surface is a totally alien motivation in the form of an unusually curious octopus. This beautiful record of an animal's entire life, something seldom achieved in the wild, let alone underwater, was shot over a full year and explores the habits and the personality of a strange undulating creature that most of us have only ever eaten. That's a little bit cynical there. Beyond intelligent, dexterous, and resilient, the cephalopod shares her secret world with Foster as they develop a touching bond. The underwater encounters are literally breathtaking as Foster holds his breath while interacting with the octopus. An immersive portrait of human-animal understanding, brimming with danger, drama, and devastating emotion, My Octopus Teacher grabs you with all 8 arms and changes its camouflage, showing you colors and textures you never saw before. What she taught me is to feel that you are part of this place, not a visitor. And that's a huge difference, says Craig Foster. Okay, why did I read through it? If you are an English home language speaker, certain things here would automatically have thrown up warning bells in your ears. Obviously, the text contains deliberate errors, and they really, boop, boop, they activate flashing warning lights. Now that we've done that, let's go to our questions. Right, and the first one says, rewrite the first sentence, removing the redundancy. Now, in the first presentation, if my memory serves me correct, the first in the series, I said redundancy and tautology are effectively exactly the same thing. I've just used tautology. I used the word exactly. Effectively the same thing. Okay. Let's go back to sentence number 1 and take a look at what redundancy we can find. Just by the way, I will say that most of the papers which I moderated had this answer as correct. Okay, here's our first sentence. And we've got Craig Foster, suffering from a loss of purpose, begins a daily diving regimen every day. Bap, 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 bap. Daily is the same meaning as every day. There's our tautology. One of those two must go. You either dump daily or you dump every day. Most of the people removed every day. Okay, there we are. That's your tautology. And your redundancy, all wound up as one. Okay, now, lines 2 to 3. In order to gradually re-energize himself. Now, in this case, we've got the quote, so we don't have to go to the text. Explain why the word order in the sentence fragment is incorrect. Now, the correct answer is, of course, it is a split infinitive. Many of you, I know, have never heard of a split infinitive before. It's not really that commonly used, except by certain grammar Nazis such as myself. But it is still recognized as an important part of getting the English correct. So, what we have here is an infinitive, which is to re-energize, which has been split. The two has been separated from re-energize by an adverb, gradually. And that is considered not a language error, but a convention error. Now, what is the difference here? A language error alters meaning. A convention error points out that this is not the way it's done if you want to use correct English. But it does not change the meaning. Another example of a convention error would be ending a sentence with a preposition. It doesn't alter the meaning. You know, just let me do my radio presenter act. Are you ready? Here's my phone, right? Okay. Hello, this is, come on, I need a name for a radio. This is Radio Slotdorp. Who am I talking to? Okay, immediately I've done a convention. I've used a convention error there. It should be, to whom am I talking? Because you're not supposed to end sentences with prepositions. Now, you could understand clearly what I'm saying, but it's still not how we speak the Queen's English. If you're going to speak the Queen's English, do it. If you want to speak some other form of English, do that. But don't try to mix the two. And here, in the English department of the Free State, the Queen's English is that for which we hope and strive. There we are. Got it nicely without tangling myself too badly. Okay, so this is a split infinitive. When I was moderating these papers, I did come across quite a few people who said, just for example, the adverb is in the wrong place. And that, to my mind, is a correct answer. You may not even have heard of the term split infinitive, but if you know what the fault is, you've answered the question. You've explained why the word order is incorrect. Okay, so then we've got 5.2, write the words in the correct order. And that would be, in order to re-energize himself gradually. It's very simple. You just move the gradually to the end of the sentence. You could even, if you really want to do it, it sounds awful, but it is technically correct. In order gradually to re-energize himself. You can say it like that, but I say it sounds so much better if the gradually comes after, at the back of the sentence. In order to re-energize himself gradually. And it works quite well. Right. Let's move on there. Right, here we come to the hyphen question. Now, just in case you are wondering, a hyphen is always used within words. It can be used to join two words together to make a compound word. It then becomes a single compound word. Or it can be used to clarify meaning. Now, in this case, you are separating a prefix from the root word in order not to change its meaning. If you had to remove the hyphen, it would come out as re-energize. And that is, in fact, not an English word, to the best of my knowledge. I don't know every single word in the English language. There are literally millions of them. And maybe somewhere, somehow, there's a scientific term called re-energizing, but it's not part of my vocabulary. So, that one there, the hyphen is being used to separate the prefix from the root word so that the meaning is not impaired. Okay. I think we have covered that fairly thoroughly. Oh, just to add something to that. In the marking centers where we tend to gather at the end of the year, sometimes the instruction is given to remark. And that's very interesting because the correct spelling of remark is re-mark. If you spell it without the hyphen, it becomes a remark, which is a comment on something. I think that's very interesting, and I hope you do too. Okay, we've covered that. Let's move on. Noun form of entire. Now, you must know your parts of speech. They're not that complicated. A part of speech is merely a type of word. There are, in the English language, 8, or perhaps the Americans also add a 9th one, the interjection or exclamation, whatever they want to call it. Like hitting your thumb with a hammer and you say, ouch. I do think that's quite a good idea is to add that one, but let's stick to our original 8, and they are verbs, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, pronouns, conjunctions, prepositions, and articles. Now here you are taking entire, which is an adjective, and you must convert it into a noun. This, unfortunately, or well, I can't say unfortunately, it's just the way it is. The noun form of entire is entirety. It's complicated. It's not a commonly used word. But having said that, it is definitely a part of my vocabulary, so therefore I think that's a perfectly good question in this exam. But the reason I'm harping on about this, you have to know both the fact that that is a noun, that is an adjective, so that you can convert it into its noun form, right? So it's more than one item of knowledge you are required to have there. Let's move on. Here's a classic multiple choice question. But what's interesting to know, most multiple choice questions are lower order. It's something you know or you don't know. This one isn't. This one's middle order because you have to understand the definitions of compound sentence, complex sentence, simple sentence. They have specific definitions. And the definition, well, let's look at the bottom. Is the sentence incomplete? No, it's not. It's definitely a complete sentence. Is it a simple sentence? A simple sentence is, I'm working up from the bottom, by the way. A simple sentence is subject, verb, object, or also known as subject, predicate. And this here has two verbs. You've got the underwater encounters are. Okay, there's your first verb. I know sometimes that's an auxiliary verb, but in this case it's a verb by itself. And then as Foster holds his breath. Okay, so we've definitely got two verbs. We've definitely got two subjects, the underwater encounters and Foster. So no, it's not a simple sentence. Is it a complex sentence? Now, a complex sentence is a main clause and at least one subordinate clause. So now we have to look, do we have a subordinate clause in this sentence? We've got here, the underwater encounters are literally breathtaking. Is that a main clause? Definitely. You can chop off the rest of the sentence, throw it away, you'd have a perfectly valid sentence just with that clause. Therefore, it's a main clause. Okay, and then also we have, Foster holds his breath while interacting with the octopus. Is that a main clause? Yes, it's a sentence by itself. All we have in between the two of them is a conjunction. You can use a conjunction to join two main clauses together. We don't have a subordinate clause there. Therefore, it's not a complex sentence. Therefore, it is a compound sentence. Because a compound sentence is a sentence containing two or more main clauses, which causes a massive amount of confusion in paper 3, because people try to join main clauses together with commas. You're not allowed to do that. You can join the main clauses together with a semicolon or a conjunction, but you can't join them together with commas. That doesn't work. That's called comma splice error. All right. So there we are. There we have our multiple choice question, which is, to my mind, brilliantly compiled. It's really a test of both knowledge and application of knowledge. I like this very much. Okay. And here we have something that was not well answered. This is the reported speech, which is also called the indirect speech. Direct speech is what you have here in inverted commas or in quotation marks, whatever you want to call them. That's another one where we're using two terms for the same thing. She taught me to feel part of the place. Okay? And it says here, rewrite the sentence in the reported speech starting with. Craig Foster said that. Now, we're going to look at this in some detail, but I'm just keeping one eye on the clock. I see the clock is moving much faster than I had intended. Just to clarify things here, the main item to be altered in this case is the tense, right? Always, when you are converting direct speech to indirect, you check your introductory verb. If the introductory verb is in the past tense, and it is in the past tense here, then you must take your original sentence backwards in time by one tense. And if that sounds confusing, sorry about that, it is. All right, so in what tense is this one? This one is in the past tense. She taught me. It doesn't say she teaches me, it says she taught me. That's past tense. Therefore, your answer must be in the past perfect tense. In other words, she had taught me. Craig Forster said that she had taught me to feel part of the place. Okay, so very important, know your tenses. And I'm starting to get nervous here. I mean, I've included lots and lots of information on tenses and stuff. Okay, we shall go through them, but in much more of a hurry than I had originally intended. Okay, we've covered that. Now we get a sentence fragment, not a visitor. That is called a sentence fragment because it does not form a complete sentence. There's no verb. A full sentence must have a verb, all right? Must have a subject and a verb. Whether it has an object or not is debatable. We'll look at that now. Okay, so in order to do this, in order to answer this now, we have to go back to the text. Come with me, and let's find our text. And here it is here. What she taught me is to feel that you are part of this place, not a visitor. Now we've got to write that out in full. What is the subject of the sentence? I'm going to remind you. What she taught me is to feel that you are part of this place. And if we had to write this out correctly, I would then put a semicolon there, and I would add then, you are not a visitor, because then we've got two main clauses joined together. You could do it with a semicolon. So basically what we're looking for here is, you are not a visitor, because the subject must be you. The importance of checking this in context in the main text. Okay. Back we go. Then, correct the error of tense. In paragraph 4, let's go to paragraph 4 again. There we are. An immersive portrait of human-animal understanding, brimming with danger, drama, and devastating emotion. My octopus teacher grabs you with all 8 arms, ha-ha, that's witty, and changes its camouflage, equally witty, showing you colors and textures you never saw before. It's not you never saw before in this context. It's you have never seen before. Okay, you never saw before is now just not correct here. It's scrambled, it's mildly scrambled 2 tenses. Okay, so it must be you have never seen before, right? Because we're going back into the past tense there. Okay, right, let's go back to our, I think we have therefore reached the end of that particular section. Yeah, that's the last of the questions. We are going to take a break. When we come back, and that's going to be in a no less than a minute, I assure you. I'm just going to drink some more of this wonderful UOF's water. Then we're going to look at tenses, because I have specifically been asked to do this, and it is vital not only in this part. So please bear with me. This was the third in our series of the, I'm getting tongue-tied now, the third of our episodes in the series on English Home Language, Paper 1, exam tips. I'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to episode 4 of the series, English Home Language, Paper 1, exam tips. And as promised, here we are going to look briefly at tenses because they really matter. Because obviously, if you're confused about tenses, you won't know if you're in the present, the past, or the future. And then, of course, we have the present, the past, and the future walked into a bar. The situation was tense. Ha ha ha. Right. Now here we're going to start with the example of intransitive sentences, and for you that do not know what the meaning of that, for you who do not know the meaning of that, an intransitive sentence has no object. Take a look at this. Present tense, you see that? There's no object to that. It's just he walks. And then of course you've got your simple tense, your simple form and your continuous form. Right, past tense, he walked, he was walking, no complication there. Future tense, he will walk, he will be walking, no problem there. Past, present, future. Now, here comes the present perfect tense. Okay, he has walked, he has been walking. Right, and here we've got the past perfect tense. He had walked. And finally, the future perfect tense, he will have walked. Now, the reason I'm looking at this, if you take the present tense and you, as we did in the previous episode, and if you take the present tense backwards, it becomes past tense. And if you take it one tense further backwards, it becomes past perfect tense. You have to know these tenses. Here is a lovely table in front of you. This is how to learn tenses. I can't think of any better way. Also, of course, you practice writing them out and you practice converting them, but that more or less sums it up. Let's just take a look at two more such tables and then we'll go on. Here is the transitive sentences with a regular verb. Now, a transitive sentence has an object. Let's take a look. Present tense, you have the subject, you, and the object, me. Past tense, right, same story, you and me. Future tense, there it is. Okay, perfect tense, have helped. Past perfect, had helped. Again, that's had. And future perfect, will have. Okay, that's all there is to it. Just remember, intransitive, no object, transitive, object. And regular verb, you notice this, help becomes helped. That is the normal way to put something into the past tense. You simply add the suffix ed. That's it. Now though, however, we're going to use irregular verbs. Just to give you an example. Present tense, okay, and again it's a transitive, so you've got an object which is fresh bread, whatever you want to walk there, but eat now becomes ate. All right? Okay, shall eat. Please note the correct auxiliary verb in the future tense for the first person. We talk about I or we shall. I know not many people do that nowadays. It's long since gone out in the colloquial language. But remember, we're talking the Queen's English here. We are royalty, or at least peerage at the very least, because we use the correct auxiliary verbs and we do not split infinitives. Okay? Perfect tense, have eaten. Okay, please note that. Okay, past perfect, had eaten, and then shall have eaten. And this is why in the continuous form, it's very difficult to convert these into the passive tense because already you have 3 auxiliary verbs. Shall have been. That's complex. Okay, and in the passive voice, it is an absolute cacophony of noise is horrible. Technically correct language, but nobody uses that because it sounds so awful. But here in the active voice, no problem. Okay, let's continue. Now, here I'm going to briefly show you changing direct speech to indirect. This is a guideline. We don't have time to go through it all, so I'm going to skip over most of it and just go to the summary at the end. Okay, here we are, guideline. Alter the pronouns if necessary. Okay, insert a connecting word if necessary. All of these are guidelines, not rules. Okay, remove most of the punctuation. Yes, you do that. 90% of the time, all that's going to be left of the punctuation is a capital letter in the beginning and a full stop at the end. Change the adverbs if necessary. For example, yesterday becomes the previous day. Tomorrow will become the next day. All right, and change the tense. And the tense is pretty much the big one. I've got two examples here which I like to use. I've been using these examples for as long as I've been doing these presentations. Here we've got, the boy asked, when was this made and how much does it cost? Now, I've highlighted in red the stuff that's got to be changed. And here we've got, the boy asked when. You don't need to insert a connecting word in this case. When this becomes that, was past tense, becomes past perfect tense, had been made, and how much does it cost and what it cost. Okay. Please note, all the punctuation has gone except for the capital letter and the full stop. Let's go on to another one. Right. Timothy said, past tense, I felt healthy yesterday, so I was able to donate blood. All right. And if we change it into indirect or reported speech, Timothy said that, we'll have to insert a connecting word here. I becomes he. Felt is past tense already, so that must become past perfect tense. Had felt, healthy, yesterday, okay, adverb of time, so that becomes the previous day. So, okay, I was becomes he had been able to donate blood. Again, all the punctuation is gone, except for the full stop and the capital letter. And that is that. Now, this was, let me just calculate it, part number 5 in our series on exam tips, answering paper 1 for English home language. Again, we're going to take a break and we'll carry on in a few minutes after we've all done what we need to do. Goodbye for now. Welcome back. This is English Home Language Paper 1 Exam Tips. And here we're going on to section 6, the advertising section. And the first thing I want to emphasize, analyze the advert. When we were discussing this, the markers pointed out to me that one of the biggest frustrations is that people don't take the time. It only takes a minute, maybe 2 minutes, to go through that advert and to analyze it in detail. There are often hidden elements which you simply miss if you don't slow down and check out the contents of that advert very carefully. It's a common mistake. People glance at the advert, go to the questions, and then look up to the advert to try to find out the responses to the questions. Don't do that. It's the same as ignoring the text of a comprehension and going back then to try to find the answers in the comprehension after reading the questions. It's a waste of time. You must read through the comprehension, the whole text, because a lot of it cannot be answered unless you've read through it all. And these questions here are really just another type of comprehension. This time you are comprehending or understanding visual elements. So please, all of you out there now, I beg of you, make sure that you take time to actually, to read the text, actually. Take time actually to read the text. There, we mustn't split infinitives, remember. Good. So we've got the analysis of the advert. And we're going to practice this now. Once again, I'm using all the texts from the prep exam. But let's take a look at this then. There are some words here which normally cause problems when they are included in the instructions of the questions. Here, for example, is the word headline. What is a headline? I mean, that's literally the thing that comes at the top of the advert. That will be a part of the text. And when headline questions come up, for some reason, a lot of people don't understand what is being asked. Okay, now, we're talking about the font. Font is the various aspects dealing with the text, such as the size. Is it in bold? Is it in italics? All right, is it an unusual font, which is not normal? If you're looking at my presentation right now, you'll see that my one is written in Baskerville Old Face. And you can tell that because if you look at the Q, this capital Q here, the tail of the Q is the most dramatic of any font. It goes literally underneath the adjoining U. It actually attaches the two letters together. And this is, of course, a serif font. Now, if you're wondering what a serif font is, take a look at, let's take a look at this lowercase n here. Do you see it has little platforms at the bottom? And it has a little tail sticking out there. Those are called serifs. And in formal writing, such as in newspapers and stuff like that, magazines, it is considered a convention application to use serif fonts. I like serif fonts. In particular, I like Baskerville. But also here you'll notice that a lot of this is in bold. It's in a much larger font over there. All right, capital letters. It's also a different type of font, I think. Fonts can vary tremendously. If you look in comics, you'll normally see they use something like Comic Sans. Sans stands for sans serif. No serifs used because it's supposed to resemble handwriting in order to make it more child-friendly. Anyway, let's move on there. The body text, in other words, the actual words, the whole cluster of the words used to form the advert. Negative imagery. Now, this is what has been deliberately omitted from the picture. All right? Possibly omitted from the text as well. The point is, it's something that you would expect to be there, but it isn't there. This can be tremendously tricky to identify, and if you come across it, be warned, you are expected to know about it. And then, of course, the layout. Layout makes a big difference. If you look at the old adverts, for example, it was always followed the same formula. Picture at the top, sometimes a headline, and then lots and lots and lots of text, which wasn't very large font. And then at the bottom, a few other comments, maybe smiling faces or something like that. That's no longer the standard layout policy. Now, layouts are tremendously creative. Very often, it's minimalist. In other words, there's almost nothing there. As you'll see, the examples from the prep exam are very sparse and all the more effective for it. So watch out for here negative imagery. Let us go on and look at some definitions. Right? These are often misunderstood. Now, here's just stating what an advertisement is. Normally a competitive method of persuading people. All right? Sometimes an advert doesn't have to be competitive. The example I use, this is just in case they trick you and they give you an informative advert. Some adverts are merely informative. In my hometown, we have a tremendous problem with rabies. And every 6 months, they inoculate the pets at the local clinic for free. And obviously, they put up posters advertising that we must please bring our pets down to the clinic where they will be inoculated against rabies. And this is what happens. Now, there's no persuasiveness about that advert. It's merely informative. They're not in competition with somebody else to produce a better rabies vaccine. It's the same one they've been using all along, and it works. Okay. However, then we have some definitions here which you must understand. A logo, there's the definition. The part that I want you to remember is the fact that a logo is always of a specific brand. Okay, you notice that? Brand. Then you have trademark. Okay, trademark is of a company. One company can have many brands. I'm going to use an example now, a famous one. Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola company, does not only sell Coca-Cola, although that is a specific brand. The Coca-Cola company also sells Sprite and Fanta and many other things as well. I don't even know them all. Score, I think, is made by Coke. And I'm just here, the point is they all fall under that trademark, even though they have their individual brands. Here's your slogan, right? There's a definition of a slogan. In case you're wondering, it comes from originally a Celtic phrase, Slygorm, which means battle cry. How battle cry evolved into a slogan in advertising, I have no idea, but it did. All right? And then you see it also called a catchphrase, something to grab attention. The classic one to my mind, that always springs to my mind, is Nike, just do it. That's quite a good one. Great slogan, great catchphrase, whatever you want to call that. But the point is, it's there to grab attention. Now, let's take a look at the adverts used. There were 2 of them, both same company, in the recent exam, the prep exam. And what is going on in this advert here? Well, I see a whole stack of tomato slices, some of which have labels on their edge, and they are stacked up in such a way that they form the shape of a tomato sauce bottle, right? And I notice also that the label over there, you've got Heinz, what looks like Heinz 57. Over here you have Heinz tomato ketchup, right? 300 ml to 342 grams, right? And then at the bottom here, no one grows ketchup like Heinz. And I immediately look at that catchphrase or slogan, whatever you want to call it, and I would say it's brilliantly done. There's almost nothing there as far as text is concerned. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words. And yet, to my mind, that is a brilliantly effective advert because, first, it implies the fact that you've got these tomato slices stacked on top of each other. It implies that Heinz tomato sauce is nothing but tomatoes. It is a very pure tomato sauce, by the way, although I haven't seen it much in this country. I use, of course, Coup. That's still my favorite. But now let's look at the wording in the slogan. No one grows ketchup like Heinz. Well. Normally, you would say nobody makes ketchup like Heinz, or nobody makes tomato sauce like Heinz. But here, the fact that nobody grows it, the implication is that that's very pure. That's top quality. We grow our own tomatoes and put them straight into bottles. It's clever. I like it. Let's look at the attached questions now. We have analyzed the advert. I can't think of any other details that spring to mind immediately. So now we go straight to our questions. And immediately we've got, to a great extent, we have the answer required. Now, here, this question. Note the mark allocation. It's only for 2 marks, so it's a bit unfair to make it a discuss question, but that's okay. We can deal with that. Discuss, which means investigate this by logic and argument, or reasoning and argument. Discuss the implication of the tomato slices in the visual. Now, we have already done that. It implies that this is made, you're taking tomatoes and you are immediately taking the freshest, best tomatoes and bottling them immediately. There's nothing except tomatoes in that bottle. Right? That's my interpretation of it. Okay, but the implication, what does this imply? That's a very unusual method of asking a question. It implies, it doesn't state outright, it implies that that bottle is full of fresh tomatoes, freshly grown, homemade tomatoes. Okay, and this one is quite tricky because now we have a 3-mark question. So you've got to produce a fair amount of content to reply to this. And it says here, comment critically. Okay, now, critically means you go into depth and you investigate. The actual meaning of critically is investigate by noting the merits and demerits of something. Now, that's not the only meaning, so we're not going to use that one today. The whole thing is we must go into it in depth to earn enough for 3 marks. And when you comment, you are doing that. You are commenting on it. And what are we commenting on? It's the effectiveness. Now, don't forget that. The effectiveness of what? The catch line. Do you think that's effective? Now, when you say on the effectiveness, you must start by saying it is effective or it is not effective. And then you go on to reason out why that is your opinion. Don't forget that this is a 3-mark question. And you've got to use logic and reasoning. Okay, so comment critically on the effectiveness of the catch line. There's the catch line. No one grows ketchup like Heinz. I say it's effective. Why do I say that? All right. Because of the word grows. We've looked at that already. It implies that they're not just making tomato sauce. They are growing the tomatoes and taking it through the whole process to make sure that everything is the best you can get. Okay. And, well, that's it. You're talking about the unusual use of that diction, grows as opposed to makes, implying that there's a whole lot more to the Heinz stuff and that it's extremely fresh and that it's their own homegrown tomatoes. All right, let us move on to the next one, which is even better. I thought this as an advert is, classic. Okay, now remember the rules. We must first study the advertisement. We have, this time, a tomato sauce bottle, also Heinz tomato ketchup. And we have, inching their way towards it. To my mind, it looks like a sequence of caterpillars that can't wait to get to that bottle of tomato sauce. It is so attractive to them. Or you could even say it's attractive to ants, but this to me looks like caterpillars. Brilliantly done. And it says here, when fries can't resist the attraction. Now, don't forget that Heinz is an American product, and in the US, they don't talk about slop chips the way we do. They talk about French fries, which should actually be called Belgian fries, but that's another story. Okay, so what do we have here? We've got a very clear depiction of chips, fries, acting as if they are caterpillars and walking to get to the tomato ketchup, implication being they can't resist it. Okay, and it says when fries can't resist the attraction. So the catch line actually, or the slogan, actually confirms what we are seeing visually. Right, we've analyzed that. Let's take a look at the questions. And it says here, how does the visual in the advertisement convey the message of the advertisement? For 2 marks. I say that it is implying that the tomato sauce is irresistible to chips. They go so well together that the chips are going to head for the tomato sauce no matter what happens. And the message is when fries can't resist the attraction, there we are. Irresistible attraction. Okay, I hope you agree with me there. Now we have the complicated question, the comparative question. And let's read through this together, because this is where a lot of people tripped up in September, is they neglected to do the correct comparison. Let's read the question, but slowly and carefully. In your opinion, so now you are giving your opinion, which advertisement would have a greater impact on the reader? Justify your choice by referring to both advertisements. Okay, now in my opinion, it would be text E, this one here, that's still on the page, because it is even more cunning to my mind than the previous one. Let's just go to the previous one. There it is. Okay, that's certainly an effective advert. I like it. But in my opinion, this one is more effective, because the chips give a sensation of movement there. It's almost humorous in a way that they've turned chips into caterpillars. And the visual in particular is just a little bit more eye-catching. So in other words, we've got to choose between the brilliant and the exceptional. I'll go for the exceptional because of the visual element. It's just so really skillfully done. And I would say, therefore, that text E would have a greater impact on the reader for reasons just stated. And please note that. The question is which would have a greater impact. You must include the word greater impact in your response. Okay. People, I'm keeping one eye on the clock. I would have very much liked to go into this in greater depth, but we can't. I don't think we have the time to do so. Let me just see. Okay, I'll scan through these quickly, the generally difficult questions. First, the comparison question. Remember what we said, you've got to actually compare the two, and you must respond to what's being asked in the question. The effectiveness question, we've tackled that already. And then, of course, the question that sometimes, it's not in this one, but sometimes they'll ask, what is the advertiser's intention in this advertisement? And you must know it. The only way to get advertiser's intention is to stop and study the advertisement before you attempt to answer the questions. There we are. Let's close off. This is session number 6 in this series. In this instance, we dealt with the advertisement question or advertising question in the English Home Language Paper 1. And we'll be back in a minute or two after a brief pause. Welcome back. This is section 7 of our series on English Home Language Paper 1 exam tips. And in this section, as you can see, because you have eyes, I hope, we are looking at the cartoons or comic strips. Let's go straight into it. And the first comment made by the markers is exactly the same as that for advertisements. Analyze the cartoon before looking at the questions. Spend time analyzing it. Look at the little notes underneath. Make sure that you understand it thoroughly before you start. And if, by the way, you come to the end of the cartoon and you actually pack up laughing, boy, you're going to get good marks, because that means the cartoon appealed to you, and when a cartoon appeals to you or comic strip appeals to you, it's going to be a successful set of answers for you, especially the one, if there is one relating to the humor itself. Now, one thing that they asked me to bring to your attention is facial expression versus body language. Facial expression is from here upwards. Body language is from here downwards. All right? Body language includes anything that is below the level of the head. It doesn't include the head. That's facial expression. The two are closely related, but the markers say we must not get confused between the two. They are separate entities. I mean, this is like a comparison between, and if you're doing poetry, it's a comparison between sound devices and figurative language. They are simply different things, although they are sometimes confused. They are closely linked, but they are not the same thing. All right, so don't forget that. Facial expression is here. Body language is here, there, legs, feet, everything like that. I can't show them to you all. I forgot to put pants on before I came here today, so I can't stand up and show you my legs. Okay, the tone. When you are asked about the tone, it is not negative or positive. That's not a tone. A tone is something like happy, sad, contemplative, friendly, aggressive, angry, all that sort of thing. A tone is also not loud or soft. That's irrelevant. A tone must have some sort of emotional value to it. And it's the emotion that must come out in your answer. Right? So tone, no, not negative or positive. Now, explaining the humor in something. When you are going for humor, you are looking for things such as, and here's a whole list that the markers gave me. Irony. In other words, the opposite of what is stated is intended, or it could also be dramatic irony, that we know something that the character doesn't. Bathos is anticlimax, where you build up to this big climax and falls flat at the end. And it turns out to be of no consequence whatsoever. Okay, sarcasm is, of course, irony with a nasty cutting edge. Satire is just ripping somebody off, taking the mickey out of them. And that's not also always a person, by the way. Satire can be used to take the mickey out of a particular aspect of society. All right? Can be used to criticize an organization. So anything that is fair game for criticism through humor, and it falls into the satire category. You also have parody, is a ridiculous copy of something, right? You'll be sort of, for example, doing a misquote of a famous quotation. A paradox is something that doesn't seem to make sense at first, but after you read it a couple of times, suddenly you realize that, hey, hold on, that's actually true, even though it doesn't seem to be. It is logical, but only after you've looked at it a few times. A pun is, of course, a play on words, and ambiguity is double meaning. When you're not sure which one of the meanings to apply. My pun, I used the example in one of the earlier broadcasts, the past, the present, and the future. Walk into a bar. It was tense. Ha, 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 ha. A play on the word tense. That's a good pun. I quite like that one, actually. And then, of course, ambiguity is when you're not really sure of the meaning of the word, or somebody has cleverly played on the meaning of the word. Present, for example, can mean a tense, or present can also mean a gift. So you can actually play around and construct a sentence in which the meaning is not clearly stated. And there are many such words in English. I mean, English is full of words like that. All right, I'm just thinking of other ones. No, nothing comes to mind at the moment. However, for the sake of time, we're going to move straight on and look at, framing. I was asked specifically to specify framing. When you are asked to refer to a specific frame, refer to that frame only. Sometimes you'll be asked to refer to two frames and to compare them. But in that case, refer to only those two frames. Don't include information from any other one. Please remember that. Here is the cartoon, and here you see it in glorious color. What a fabulous cartoon this is. This is Hager the Horrible. And his wife, Helga, is sitting nagging him. All right? I've been ironing clothes, that's frame 1. Washing windows, frame 2. Scrubbing floors, frame 3. And you just sit there waiting for me to bring you a snack. What does that say about you? I'm patient. What's the humor in this one? I'd say this one is an example of a bathos or anticlimax. You know, he's completely missed the point of what his wife's saying. He's regarding it as praise, not as criticism, which is absolutely lovely. All right? You've got her in the beginning, not exactly calm, but not yet getting worked up. In the second frame, washing windows. Again, not exactly calm, but you can see these adjutrons, these line movements, are indicating that she's now moving forwards and her forefinger is now up. Scrubbing floors, and here you've got heat waves coming off her head, showing that she's becoming angry, or those are also known as emanata. Scrubbing floors, and now her hands thrown open wide to show that she's getting worked up. And you just sit there waiting for me to bring you a snack. Finger now out and pointing accusingly. Hager, in the meantime, hasn't even moved his posture. And now she shouts. Look at what the font tells us. The font tells us she's shouting. And you've got the lines coming out like that. What does that say about you? Question mark plus exclamation mark. Oh dear, that's a very agitated, angry question. And all he says is, I'm patient. Lovely. Okay, and the expression on Helga's face now is just, oh no. This, translation from her expression. What am I going to do with this brainless, insensitive husband of mine? Okay, there we are. We've analyzed the cartoon. Let us move on. And we have here the questions. Provide a possible reason for Hagar's silence in frames 1 to 5. Okay, back we go. There are frames 1 to 5. You see that? 1 to 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hagar doesn't so much as move, let alone speak. Reason? He's just waiting for Helga to finish ranting and raving at him. So he can then say, where's my snack? Okay. Now here, discuss. Okay. So this is for 3 marks this time, slightly more complex. Discuss how Helga's body language and facial expression. Now we've just looked at the fact that body language and facial expression are not the same. Okay, so you've got to add elements of both of those. Support her words in frame 4. Okay, now this is frame 4. Let's go to it. Body language, accusing finger being pointed at Hagar. This arm held down stiffly with a fist at her side. She is standing erect. Okay, there we are. We've got body language. Facial expression, wide open mouth and eyebrows down in the middle, indicating anger. All right. And then, what are we looking at there? Sorry. Support her words in frame 4. And she is now becoming accusational, and you just sit there waiting for me to bring you a snack. Okay, you can almost hear the bite in those words. And there we can see she's angry. There we can see her body language is accusing. Okay, and I think we have answered the question. We have discussed it. Then, comment on Helga's tone in frame 5. Okay, this is where she detonates. The tone there, angry, accusatory, whatever you want to say there, but it's not loud. Remember, well, it's certainly loud, but that's not the tone. But she's angry, and she's upset, and she's annoyed, and she's frustrated because she's been doing all the work and Helga just sits. Right? So the tone there, definitely angry. So comment on Helga's tone in frame 5 because she's upset. And finally, evaluate the cartoonist's success in creating humor in the comic strip. Yep, bingo, we've already done that. It's bathos, the anticlimax. So, how successful is it? I would say, okay, now we've got to evaluate the cartoonist's success. Is it completely successful? Is it completely unsuccessful? Is it generally successful? Is it sort of successful? In my opinion, I would say, I'm just going to go back there, fully successful. I found this very funny indeed. Okay, so I say fully successful. The bathos at the end is really funny. The effect of the bathos on Helga, also looking at her face, oh dear, the poor woman. She must be so frustrated with this insensitive, unfeeling husband who has no idea why she's even upset. 100%, this is funny. People, we have only a few minutes left. I'm going to take a quick break, very quick, and then we're going to take an even quicker look at the last section. Just don't forget, this was segment 7, if memory serves correctly, of our series. This is English Home Language, Paper 1, exam tips. We're going to take a break now, and I'll see you in less than a minute. Welcome back to our 8th and final section of this series on answering English Home Language Paper 1, what you could otherwise say, exam tips. And here we come to our comprehension section. Now, before you look at anything else, you have to analyze your questions. And here are the complicated instructions that are sometimes given in the papers. Actually, very commonly given. Obviously, compare and discuss and evaluate. Extremely common instructions. Comment on. You must understand what these words mean. I cannot now go into full definitions because unfortunately I've overrun my time limit. So please bear with me. Here are other advanced instruction words which you are less likely to encounter except for account for and critically. When you are asked to critically discuss, please make sure that it is in depth. Now, moving on. One of the issues which I've been asked to bring up is the fact that people obviously have read the text, but they then blow it by not reading the questions. You must read the questions carefully. This is how to do it. First, you find out, are there details limiting the scope of your answer? I've put here, refer to line 22. Another such detail could be, in your own words, explain. That means you can't quote from the text. Okay? So that's limiting the scope of the answer. Instruction words. We've just been through the list of instruction words, discuss, compare, evaluate, do it critically, comment on, all those words that you are going to get. Okay, and here are, then you go on, basically once you've done your limiting factors and once you've done your instruction words, then you look at the rest of the question. You must analyze your questions in the same depth with which you read the text. Okay, never just jump into things. Slow down and do it properly. Remember what we said at the beginning. What the method you're using here is that you are going to answer this exam in the following order. Summary, language, in other words, summary, question 2, language, question 5, advertisement, question 3, a cartoon or comic strip, question 4, and then finally, comprehension, question 1. You must leave this one for last. That way you can do it, I wouldn't say at your leisure, but with a lot less stress on you, because your big money earners are already behind you. You've already passed your paper. Now it's merely a question of going for a distinction. So you can slow down and do it properly. Okay, moving on. Check your mark allocation. Big mistake some people make. They do not check the marks. Okay, when you are quoting, please make sure it's the correct length. Okay, and use quotation marks. Now I'm going to hammer onto that one. You must use quotation marks when you are quoting directly from the text. Not because you're going to lose marks if you don't, but you are showing to the marker, hey, look, I am quoting. Right? That is important. Now, always refer to the text. Don't use your own knowledge. We say the same thing in the summary. It is problematic if you know something about the text and you can provide an answer which is not taken from the text. That's a no-no. You've got to show that you are understanding that specific text. Don't use your own knowledge. Okay, now this one. If when you are answering a comprehension, you copy directly from the text, it proves to the marker that you do not understand the answer. You do not understand the question, you do not understand the text, and you're probably going to wind up with an answer of 0. Obviously, this doesn't apply to quoting. If you're asked to quote, that's fine. Or if you need to quote in order to justify a point that you're making, that's fine. Just remember to use quotation marks, right? But the whole thing here is your English home language. You must demonstrate an ability, a language ability, that the marker knows that you understand what's going on in that comprehension test, or the comprehension component of the exam. And this one, funnily enough, is completely unrelated to the English aspect, but please number your answers correctly. If you don't, you're in a lot of trouble. Okay? Because the various numbering systems can get very complicated indeed. And finally, line open between answers. That, again, nothing to do with English. It just makes it so much easier to mark. We can see where one answer stops and where the next one begins. Now, people, I've just had the sound of a shotgun being cocked. It's not a very nice sound. And I see it's now being pointed at me. And they're saying, if you don't leave the studio immediately, you're going to be carried out. This was our final section. This was dealing with, very briefly, with answering the comprehension test. And it is at this point that we're going to end our series on exam tips for English Home Language Paper 1. Thank you for joining me. I hope you had a bit of fun, because I know I did. Goodbye.